Hello, everyone. My name is Tyler Selhorn, and welcome to another episode of Speak Easy, the podcast where we discuss communication, productivity systems, capturing our thoughts, and how we share those thoughts with our future selves and others. We believe that managing our brains is core to 21st century work, and we're here to learn how to do it better than we did yesterday. Thanks so much for listening. Speak Easy is brought to you by Cleft, the easiest way to collect your thoughts. With our cross-platform applications, you can simply capture your ideas wherever you are and paste them where they belong later. Today, we are blessed to be learning out loud with Anna Burgess Yang. Anna is a former corporate executive turned full-time freelance writer and solopreneur. Anna ditched corporate life to take control of her time and profits. Now, Anna is on a mission to empower other solo entrepreneurs to do the same. Anna's a productivity geek, remote work evangelist, and expert in streamlining workflows. Anna shares tools, tips, and ideas to make your work life better. Anna is a full stack pro that takes advantage of all kinds of software, including Cleft, and following her advice will have you automating processes to achieve work-life integration ASAP. Anna, welcome to the podcast. Teach us your ways. How do we become integrated people as professionals?
Well, thank you so much for having me. And I have two thoughts about integration and using tools and things. The first is to find the tools that work for you. And I think that, a lot of people talk about finding, all-in-one tools that can do every single thing. And those often, in my opinion, fall short because they do like maybe one thing really well and the other things, and the other things kind of well. And so I'm a super big advocate for finding the tool that works for you. And then the other thing is to make that integration piece happen is to find tools that work well with your other tools. So maybe they have an integration, maybe they just fit really well into your workflow or something like that. So they're not a standalone piece, even though they just do one thing really well.
Okay, take us up a level because you're talking about software integration, and I love that you started there. I love it, but I'm wanting to zoom out a bit. And we were talking before the podcast about, just to timestamp this a little bit. Sorry, we're talking the day after the American Halloween celebration. We sent kids off to school after a late evening, or being outside. Maybe we've got some fall allergies. Guilty, I have a leaf moss allergy. I'm curious, how do you think about integrating yourself as a person with your work?
Yeah, I always think about kind of work-life integrate is a good word because I always think about work-life integration rather than work-life balance. And the difference between the two is that work-life balance, in theory, everything's at an equilibrium, right? And for me, work-life integration means you're in control. And that might mean just you're in control of time. You're in control of the tools that you use, which is always a big thing for me because I'm a productivity geek, as you said in the intro. But, figuring out how to choose the time, the place, the app, the technology that works best for you. And it's everybody's day and life looks different all the time. And it can look different from one week to the next, with Halloween being a perfect example where my day was kind of cut short because I had to get the kids ready and all of that. And so that was a choice that I made. And so that integration for me is always about time and technology fitting into who I am and what I do.
Well, I think that is the invitation that we as creators are trying to build technologies that are suited for every kind of brain, every kind of person, right? So that you can do those integrated activities where maybe you had a thought that you want to capture on the walk of while you're supervising your kids on a Halloween night, but it's not necessarily a great place to be staring into your phone. But while you're waiting for the things to be put into the bags and all that sort of stuff, you can be thinking to yourself and collecting those thoughts and having those moments, even when we happen to be stepping away from our keyboard. I think that's interesting to hear you talking about integration, and you're mentioning being a parent and having those sorts of things. And, for me, I always think about my identity stack, right? Is that I am a spouse, I'm a parent, I'm a youth sports coach. I am a software nerd too, right? Like you mentioned that as well, right? Those are things that are the roots of my success as a professional, right? And I think that taking control of your own time, taking control of your own tools, right, is a part of that story of saying, okay, you know what? I'm going to choose this, not that, because it works the way I think. And I guess maybe that's what I want to invite you into. When you're doing that thought capture, you do a lot of writing, that first version, that first draft. How do you get into the space of capturing the beginning of that excellent copywriting that you ship for your clients? What do we do to get started on that path?
So it really depends on how half-baked or fully formed thought
Hmm.
it is at the time. And you mentioned voice capture, and I've really gotten into voice capture this year because one, I think the tools have just gotten a lot better. If I look back to however many years ago, getting a voice capture, if I dictated something maybe into my iPhone notes, the idea of it actually being something that I understood later was maybe not as great as it is now. And so I did a lot of typing back whatever in creating notes or something. And that was harder. Just my thumbs don't, I'm an elder millennial, my thumbs don't move very fast. I think I use a couple different techniques and it depends. And so a few things I do is try to capture like to-dos on the go because I am incredibly busy and the things that pop into my head are not necessarily the things that I can put somewhere useful at that moment. But I don't want to lose track of them. Shoot, I need to call the dentist or something like that. Those are hard. And that's why I try to be able to dictate those now so that I can get them for later. Another would be something like dictating an entire idea of what I need to get done that day. That happens to be how I use Cleft is like, hey, okay, I need to start here. I need to do these things. I need to make sure I don't miss these things. So I kind of make a list to myself while it's in my brain and while I'm thinking about it. And then the third thing I do is dictate like an entire draft of something I want to publish, long form, which is a lot of long form content. I have a Substack, I have a blog, and sometimes I'm in a
Pause
sphere.
right
I
there for a
know.
second, Anna.
All
No,
right.
because I want to plus one Anna as a great follow, right? So we know she's on every platform. She is on all the ways that you can get something into your inbox or into your feed. Like we're of course going to include her links in the show notes, but I want to just make sure that the reason why Anna's on is because she is an internet person on the internet doing internet things and she is sharing the best stuff. And I've learned so much from you over the years. So thank you for all the ways that you're learning out loud, even beyond this moment on the podcast.
Well, thank you for that. Yeah. So I publish a lot on the internet in general. And so sometimes my dictation is I have an idea for a blog post and it is enough that I could just start by dictating it to myself and then cleaning up the transcript and, polishing it and editing it later. But it's more than just I have this idea for post. It's just an idea. And so that's another way that I use voice dictation to capture on the go in the moments. I've had the terrible moment where I had this great idea in my head that I don't capture it in any way and it's gone. There are too many things. It falls out of my brain. And then I'm really sad about it because I thought whatever I had originally, the second version is never as good as the first. I love doing that now. And it's become kind of an integral part of my
Well,
day.
that's fantastic. Thank you for saying Cleft's name as well in those tools that are getting better, right? Of actually
Yes.
capturing the thought or even refining the thought, right? I know that for me, I have blinking cursor syndrome sometimes, right? Like you're like obviously a much more mature and polished writer than I am. I'm somebody who had 300% of the adult attention that they needed when they were a kid. I was like the only child and the only grandchild for 10 years. So like everybody was like, oh, Tyler's here. And so I got to say all the things and I didn't have a lot of time to myself. And so I got to talk a lot. Well, and I'm also a podcaster. So here we are. Voice capture is really important to me. I guess maybe I'm curious to hear that like we've talked about tools and integrating tools and using voice capture. How do you get your voice capture ideas to end up in the spots that you want? Right. Like you probably, I know enough about you and how you work to know that you've got like some systems that are for client project management and some systems that are for like home, like executive, the CEO of your home type of things. Like, how do you keep things organized in the ways that you're obviously a tech enabled like person, right? And how do you like keep those in the right places or get them into the right places instead of in the just stuck in the inbox and that sort of stuff?
So as I mentioned at the beginning, I'm a big fan of using the best tool for the
Yeah.
job, right? So what I use to put something on my to-do list is not the same as what I use to kind of like dictate my day or dictate a blog post to myself. So I use Zapier, an automation tool in the background to kind of get things in the right place. So they're not stuck in kind of this like ether of a dictation tool. And I use Siri on my phone, for example, to dictate, hey, this is a to-do I need to follow up on. And use Zapier to send that to, which happens to be my to-do tool of choice. And when I dictate an entire blog post to myself, I use Zapier to get that into the tool that I use to polish and kind of refine that and things like that. And also into Trello, which is what I use for project management. So I guess like Zapier is the common thread that to start with, this is where it started. And I use that best tool for that dictation, but this is where I needed to end up so I can actually do the next or the next thing that I need to do.
Also time stamping this episode just slightly. Yesterday, we were featured, Cleft was featured on the Zapier blog as a new official integration. Obviously, if you had an account, you could use Zapier before this, but as part of our maturing process with our relationship with Zapier, we are now something that shows up when you're looking at things that are like for voice capture, like in their marketplace. If you're a Zapier user and you're looking for a way to capture your voice and capture your thoughts and be able to do some of the things that, Anna is talking about, like we are a fully integrated piece with Zapier now. So very exciting news there. But I think maybe I'm wondering, like the part that I think is always tricky for me when I start building an automation is how do I go from here is my voice or here is this transcription or here is this Cleft summary? How do I know that it's going to go to Todoist or go to Trello or go to my editing app? Like, how do I get that managed? I think a lot of people are, I love the auto capture feature on our plus plan where I can just paste it where it belongs. That's even part of our intro read is to say, paste it where it belongs later. Well, Anna's like on that next level, like many levels above where it automatically goes where I want it to go. How do you do that?
I think I start with where would I have done this manually? Until earlier this year, I was mostly writing blog posts as an example I use an app called Reflect. And that's where I go through and
shout out to those
code.
Reflect users out there. I've also supported other Cleft and Reflect integrators before connecting through Zapier. Yeah, cool. So Reflect.
Yeah, Reflect is a great tool, just like the features that it has, and it has nice text editing and stuff like that. So that's where I want to draft. And so I have to think, okay, so before I would just type my notes and Reflect. Now I'm replacing that with dictation. How do I make it so I'm not copying and pasting, right? And so that's how I start, or my switch is where I keep track of what do I need to do today. Instead of typing it to Todoist, which would require me to open the app on my phone and type something in. You can send emails too, but that's again another step. So if I want to do this, what can I do to say I need to do this and dictate that somewhere and have it end up where it needs to go? So I'm replacing the typing process with a voice process, but it needs to end up in the same place.
Right. Yeah, I love this space. I'm a super nerd about systems, right? And getting it to do the thing that you want it to do without you being the one pressing the button. Oh, I love those systems where you just capture your voice and it goes off to where it belongs and then it ends up where you need it later just automatically. I think those sorts of systems and it's really, really exciting to see you building that space as well. Okay, so you mentioned something earlier that I want to return to, and you talked about it depends on how baked an idea is. And I'm curious to hear how you delineate between things that are half baked and fully baked. When you think of an idea that is half baked, what is that? Right? Versus something that is fully baked. What is the difference between fully baked and half baked ideas in your head?
So there are actually 3 levels for
Okay.
me, and probably listeners are going to be, oh my goodness, what is
Why
she doing? Why is this so hard? Why
okay,
is this
please
so
stop
hard?
apologizing. I feel like this is a different kind of a similar prompt that I've given to other guests, and it's really fun to hear everyone replying in the same way. They're like, "You want to know how my brain thinks about the things?" Yes. Yes, that's what we're here to do. That's exactly right, because everybody, has their own way of thinking, right? And when we get to, you open up the lid a little bit and show us how things are moving around in that gray matter, it's really fun to reflect and to say to ourselves, okay, I like how she thinks about this, man. This isn't for me. But, if you tell us the real things, we get to decide for ourselves what's for us or not.
Okay, well, then I will give you all the real
Please.
things. So I have 3 levels of where my thoughts are, especially when I'm writing longer form content. I have level 1 would be, this is an idea. This is a topic I want to talk about, and I have thought no further than that. I don't know what direction I'm going to take this. Maybe I was listening to a podcast and I thought, oh, sure, I could put my own spin on that. So for that, I use Siri on my phone. It's connected to Zapier. I just say, hey, Siri. Oh my God, she's going to talk to me. Oh my gosh, I need to do that. And you turn that off. I say, hey, Apple built-in thing. I have a new idea. And it's just a new idea. I dictate like a couple of words, nothing more. And then Zapier picks that up and puts it in Trello, which is what I use for project management. So now it's in there. I can fully flesh it out later, but I don't lose the idea. And that's the important part for me. And that's the part where I cry if I think, oh my gosh, I had this idea while I was driving and then I lost it. It's gone. So that works well for. Then I have the idea that I have some thoughts, it's more nuanced, and I'm concerned that if I just tell the app on my phone, whose name I will not say out loud, that if I say that, I won't quite remember what I meant. It needs a little bit more context so that later me that goes back understands. So for that, I use Cleft. I'll actually open it up and I'll be like, I'll start talking about, okay, this is the thing. And I'm going to start talking, give it like a couple of bullet points, maybe, so I don't lose what I wanted to think. The third level is I need to actually dictate out this blog post. And I love doing that when I'm driving. And I love doing, I'll just turn it on while I'm driving, or I do that when I'm walking. And some people might think, oh, why would I want to just walk and, get away from work. And that is totally justifiable. But I walk and like to do something. I like to listen to a podcast. I like to dictate things to myself. That's just like how I work. For me, that is relaxing. It's just doing one of those things. So I use an app called Fireflies. I will dictate out an entire blog post sometimes. I run it. And then in the background, it runs through Zapier, runs through OpenAI, which cleans up the transcript, takes out the timestamp, takes out the speaker names, kind of organizes it, and then drops it into Reflect and says, okay, here's your half-baked blog post, kind of ready to go. And then I'm polishing and publishing. So I'm saving myself a ton of time with 15 minutes of dictating versus typing all of that out.
It is so interesting to hear you rhyming with so many of the ways that we think about capturing thoughts and publishing thoughts. It is our goal to smush together at Cleft, right? We're trying to smush the space between voice drafts and that first draft, like get it really, really small, as tight as we can, almost like close to the brain. And we think that voice happens to be a really great way to do that. And then just hinting at like future products from the Cleft team that we also want to smush that space between first and final published draft as well. But that's really fun to hear you saying those things. It's a professional hazard to have the phone there. I know other podcasters that have used phrases like ahoy telephone and yo dingus to describe their phrase for the wake word for their machine to listen to their voice.
I listened to a podcast a couple of weeks ago where they said something Alexa. And of course,
Your
Alexa
stuff went off.
was like, hi, I have an Alexa device in the room where I am right now, but its wake word is something different, which I'm not going to say because that would set it off. But I totally understand that's the world we live in. And that if you say it, it's going to go off. And I just forgot about Siri.
Apologies to all the listeners. Hopefully you have your headphones in today. I think that's so neat to just think about those different levels of how you capture those things. There's some things that are just ideas and that you can't let it die. So you have the wake word for ahoy telephone to get that thing out. You've also got those like maybe more fleshed out ideas that need to end up in a different place and you're using Cleft for that. And then you've also got those things where you're just doing dictation, right? Like classic dictation, and that you're using the computer teammate to help you clean that up and make it better for when it's time for you to come back to it yourself. Like smushing together that space of idea to published, like, and making that a tight loop and making it as best as you can. I guess maybe I want to invite us to conclude and just think about, like, in the space of you evaluate and consider lots of tools and why you would choose one thing over another thing. And very selfishly, I want you to talk a little bit about, like, maybe as an example of why you chose to put Cleft into that second level, right? And maybe just like reference that in a meta way of like why you would choose another tool for another job, and let that be like here's why I chose Cleft for this job. And here's how I think about that for any job, for any tool.
Yeah. A lot of times in today's world, I hear about a tool and I want to try it because I have shiny object syndrome with tools really badly because I like them. And so I'm like, okay, this tool might solve a specific need that I have, but maybe my other tools do, but they don't do as well, or there's nothing. And so when I hear about a tool, and I've known you time there for a few years. And so that was my invitation to give Cleft a try, was just like, okay, cool, here's a new thing. But when I look at tools, I always think of a couple of things. One is, does this solve a specific pain point? Or is this just like adding another tool to my text? There's a difference. That's what that evaluation period is for. And I usually give any tool a really fair shot. Like I'll really try for whatever the trial period is or anything like that. Like, I want to know, is this going to work for me? It's more than just like trying it for 5 minutes and deciding. And then the other thing is this going to save me any time, especially with paid tools and things like that? Is this going to save me time? If so, yeah, it's worth using that tool. And if not, then I'd have to think, does this benefit me in another way? Or does it replace something that I have? And so that's like kind of my two big considerations when I'm looking at a tool.
Very cool. I guess maybe I'm curious, like when you tried Cleft out, what made you say, ah, yes, this is great for this job?
Because it fit in between those other
Um,
two. I was having this problem with dictating like a quick idea that the phone next to me and previously Alexa did this
mhm,
for me, but they stopped supporting the integration that I was using, was that I couldn't say like multiple
mm,
sentences. It couldn't do that. The integration was really just to capture a few words. And so sometimes I would dictate and I would get to my idea later and be like, I don't remember what I meant. Like it's been a week or it's been before I actually get to that. But it's not to the point where I'm ready to pull out a full thing. Yeah.
mhm.
There's this in between phase of I've got an idea. It needs context so that I remember what I meant later. That's where Clep fit in for me. And also was something that I didn't know that I needed that I then started to use it for was I'm out in my car and I'm thinking through how the rest of my afternoon is going to go. And I do use, like I mentioned, Todoist for to-dos. I use Trello for project management, but there's also just like crap. I have an hour and a half left in my day and I'm driving a kid somewhere, dropping them off. What are the things that I want to do when I get back? And so then I would pull it up Cleft and like just say, hey, when I get home, blah, 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 blah. So I don't forget that those are the things I definitely want to make sure I'm done out of the giant, never ending list of things that I want to do. These are the things I want to get done in the hour that I have left in my day.
I can't think of a better way to conclude than giving our future selves the list that we intended to receive when we get back. When we're returning to that idea or that list or those items that need addressed, I'm really grateful for you showing us the way to become integrated persons who happen to be professionals and finding the tools that help us do that. Thank you so much, Anna.
Yes. Thank you for having me.
The Speak Easy podcast is brought to you by Cleft, the easiest way to collect your thoughts. With our cross-platform applications, you can simply capture your ideas wherever you are and paste them where they belong later. Check us out at cleftnotes.com. That's CLEFTNOTES.com. Thanks for listening as we think aloud together.